I gave my son a brand new SUV for his birthday, fully paid off, title in his name, a black 2023 Ford Bronco with a bright red bow. I had spent 3 weeks sourcing from a specialty print shop, because the regular plastic ones felt too cheap for the moment. It was the kind of bow you'd see in car commercials, perfect loops, glossy finish, festive but dignified. It sat gleaming in front of the Airbnb we'd rented in Paradise Valley, Arizona. The paint sparkled like a pool of ink under the desert sun, and I had spent half the morning wiping every fingerprint off the hood. I wanted it to be spotless. I wanted him to be proud, not just of the car, but maybe of me, his mother, the one who raised him on grocery store wages and tips, who patched the same pair of khakis 3 times so he could attend his job interview at night, the one who stayed up late every Christmas Eve, wrapping gifts I bought on layaway just to make sure he never felt poor on the one day of the year magic was supposed to feel real. His name is Adam. Adam Morgan, 29 years old, tall, charismatic, always knew how to charm a room. He used to be the kind of boy who picked wildflowers on the way home from school and stuffed them in a paper towel roll, because he wanted to give me something fancy. He once gave me a jar of dirt, labeled Mom's Garden Fund, when he was 8. I still have it. That boy would have cried, or at least looked me in the eyes. The man who stepped out of the rental that day just gave me a quick, half-hearted hug and said, "Wow, thanks, Mom," like I just handed him a scratch-off card with $5 on it. He barely glanced at the Bronco, didn't ask how I managed to afford it, didn't seem to notice that my hands were shaking as I passed him the keys, didn't care that my knees ached from standing too long in shoes I hadn't worn in years. He was already looking past me, watching the driveway like he was waiting for someone more important to arrive. I knew that look. A Tesla pulled up, sleek and humming. Then another. Friends of his. People I'd never met. Men with square sunglasses and button-downs with the sleeves rolled, just enough to show the expensive watches. A woman stepped out of the second car, Jenna, his girlfriend. Tall, blonde, perfect makeup. She strutted up the walkway in nude heels, carrying nothing but a phone and a look that said everything around her was beneath her expectations. I brought a casserole. I know, silly, old-fashioned. But I thought, well, I don't know what I thought. It was broccoli rice with cheddar and crushed Ritz crackers on top, a recipe from my own mother. I'd made it for every birthday, every graduation, every moment that mattered since Adam was little. It was a habit, like breathing. Adam spotted me walking up with the dish and grimaced. Just barely. "Mom, just chill," he said. "Everything's taken care of." Then he grabbed a silver drink tray off one of the nearby tables, one of the ones the caterers had set out, and shoved it into my hands. "Actually, you can help me out real quick," he said with a smirk that made my blood run cold. "Everyone, meet our waitress for the night. Please tip the help." A pause. Then laughter. Loud, biting, echoing off the rented stone walls. "She raised me right," someone shouted, and that earned a round of clapping. I stood there, drink tray trembling in my hands, plastic cup wobbling from the vibration of my fingers. My cheeks flushed hot, my heart pounded so hard it made my earrings shake. I smiled, or at least I tried. My face forgot how. Adam turned away before I could respond. Just walked off like it never happened. Jenna leaned in to whisper something to one of her friends, and whatever it was made them both laugh, a dry, sour laugh. I didn't cry. Not then. I turned, walked to the edge of the patio, and carefully set the tray down on the ledge of a fake planter box. Then I kept walking. Past the fountain, through the over-decorated living room with its sterile white couches and walls that looked like they'd never held a family photo, into a bathroom with gold fixtures and a folded towel shaped like a swan. I sat down on the toilet lid, still holding the casserole dish, and stared at the floor tiles like they might explain to me what had just happened. I had spent 5 years saving for that car, every holiday bonus, every overtime shift at the store, every coupon I clipped from the Sunday circular. I didn't go on vacations. I canceled cable. I stopped buying new shoes. I even skipped dental work last year because I was trying to get just a little closer to that price tag, $62,000. That's what it cost. That's what I gave. And he handed me a tray. No, it wasn't just a joke. It wasn't a moment of bad taste. I knew my son, Adam doesn't do bold gestures without purpose. That wasn't humiliation. That was a distraction. I took a breath and steadied my hands. Something else was going on. Something he was trying to keep me from noticing. And if I knew anything about being a mother, it was this: when your child stops looking you in the eye, they're hiding something. When they laugh too loud, they're covering a lie. And when they call you the help, after you give them the world, they're about to take even more. I stood up, placed the casserole on the marble counter, and looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had smudged. My blouse had a small stain near the collar I hadn't seen earlier. I fixed both. Then I walked back out, past the music, the clinking glasses, the DJ who looked like he was too young to drink. I passed the Bronco again, on the way out. The bow had slipped off to one side, drooping like it was tired. I didn't touch it. I just got in my car, drove home in silence, and poured myself a glass of wine I didn't want. My hand trembled the entire time. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan slowly slicing the dark. My body was exhausted, but my mind ran like a machine. I couldn't shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adam's smirk, heard the laughter, felt the weight of that drink tray in my hands like a branding iron. But more than the embarrassment, what stayed with me was the tone. His voice, too casual, too comfortable with the cruelty. And then Jenna's whisper, sharp and clear even through the vent in that guest bathroom, "Told you the car would shut her up." The words repeated themselves all night, slicing into the quiet like broken glass underfoot. By 4:30 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table, wrapped in my robe, nursing a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. The house was silent, except for the tick of the wall clock. I'd lived in that tiny brick home for almost 15 years. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a cracked tile near the stove that I'd never gotten around to replacing. It wasn't much, but it was mine, or at least I thought it was. Until I opened the lockbox. I hadn't touched that thing in years. It sat under my bed, dusty and slightly bent at the corners. The clasp stuck for a second, and for a moment I thought maybe it was a sign. Don't look, but I did. And inside, there were the documents that had shaped the hardest chapters of my life. My birth certificate. Adam's birth certificate. My divorce papers from his father. My father's will. And 1 title deed. Or at least, there should have been. The deed to the old family house, my father's house, was gone. I sat there, fingers numb, flipping through every piece of paper again and again, hoping it had somehow just slipped behind something, stuck to another page, maybe caught under a corner, but it wasn't there. My stomach turned cold. I tore through the rest of the house like a woman possessed. File cabinets, envelopes, old tax folders, that plastic bin in the closet I hadn't opened since Adam's high school graduation. Nothing. The deed was gone. At 9:01 on the dot, I called the Maricopa County Assessor's office. My voice didn't even sound like mine, too calm, too clipped, too rehearsed. "Hi, I'm trying to check the current record for a property. I believe I still own it, but I just need to confirm. I don't have the parcel number, but I have the address." I gave them the information and waited, heart thudding in my throat. The clerk on the other end clicked away for a few seconds, then said, "Looks like there was a transfer of ownership about 6 weeks ago, to a business LLC." I blinked. I didn't sell the house. He hesitated. "The transfer was notarized, under your name." I asked for the LLC's name. "Omnicore Investments," he said. It sounded like a fake company in a bad movie. I asked who signed the transfer. He read the name out loud. "Claire Morgan." My name. "Notarized by Eric Morgan." Eric. My brother. I hung up before I screamed. Eric and I hadn't spoken in over a decade. Last time we were in the same room was at our mother's funeral, where he showed up late, borrowed $50 from me for gas, and told Adam I was a control freak. And that man was now the notarizing witness on a legal transfer of my property. I picked up my phone and scrolled through messages until I found Adam's last text. It had been 2 weeks earlier. "Dinner soon?" he'd written. I replied now. "Yes, let's talk." Then I called Robin. Robin Perez had been my best friend since we both worked the night shift at the same supermarket 20 years ago. She was the one who held my hand through the divorce, who drove me home from the hospital after I had my gallbladder removed, who once threatened to flatten Adam's tires when he crashed my car and didn't apologize. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. "I'm getting a weird feeling," I said. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "I'm already putting on pants." 20 minutes later, she was sitting at my table, flipping through every folder I'd laid out, like we were planning a heist. "You think they forged your signature?" she asked. "Or they tricked me," I said. "Do you remember that eye surgery I had back in April? The one where I was groggy for a whole day?" Robin nodded. "Adam came over that afternoon, with some paperwork. Said it was insurance stuff, just a few pages, for billing. I didn't read them. I was out of it. He handed me a pen and said, 'Just sign here, and here.' I signed 5, maybe 6 pages. I don't even remember what they looked like." Robin leaned back in her chair and let out a slow breath. "They got you while you were weak." I nodded, eyes burning. "We need to get mean," she said. Robin pulled out her laptop and started digging. 10 minutes later, she was on a business registry site, typing with fury. Then she stopped. "Omnicore Investments," she read. "Single listed officer, Jenna Blake." I blinked. "Jenna? She filed the LLC?" "Right here," she said, turning the screen. It wasn't even hidden. No shell companies, no clever disguises, just Jenna's name, filed 2 months ago, with a click-to-download PDF, showing her name under managing member. I sat down, slowly. I felt like I'd been slapped. So, the Bronco wasn't a gift. It was hush money, flashy red bow and all. A distraction while they stole the last thing I had from my father. They didn't think I'd notice. Worse, they didn't think I'd fight back. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even ask Robin to say anything comforting, because comfort felt like a luxury I hadn't earned yet. Instead, I picked up a pen and started writing. Names, dates, phrases, every scrap of information I remembered from the party, from the bathroom vent, from the property clerk's voice on the phone. I made a list of every interaction that didn't feel right in the last 6 months. The times Adam had shown up unannounced. The casual way he'd mentioned taxes and paperwork. The morning he brought me coffee, which he never did, and asked me to sign a quick insurance doc before my anesthesia had even worn off. Robin called it a setup. I called it a blueprint. They waited until I was vulnerable, physically weak, medicated, legally unaware, and then they buried the knife under the sound of laughter and a birthday cake. By the time the sun went down, we had built a folder with 4 tabs: deed transfer, business registration, voicemail evidence, and notarization chain. Robin worked faster than any lawyer I'd ever met. She pulled state business registry PDFs, downloaded timestamped filings, and even dug up an archived article showing Jenna's real estate license information. I, in turn, combed through my emails and found the documents Adam had sent me the day after surgery. Subject line, "Just health stuff, keep for your records." Inside the email were 5 attachments, all blandly named, like Claim Forms 2023 TBF and Care Plan Summary TBF. Only one of them wasn't a medical document. One was the deed transfer, filed under the guise of authorization to release medical records. But when I opened it, there it was, my name, my signature, and a notarized section signed by my brother, Eric Morgan, dated 2 days after the surgery. I wanted to throw something, but I didn't, because what they did wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. This was a con job, a staged event, the kind of operation that gets taught in seminars for white-collar criminals. I wasn't just hurt. I was played. And they thought I'd go quietly, that I'd stay humiliated, that I'd be too ashamed, or tired, or old to fight. That's when I decided. I wouldn't ask them for an apology. I wouldn't confront them in private. I would expose them, cleanly, publicly, permanent. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed Adam's voice, his words, his confession, and I knew exactly how to get it. See, Adam had always been many things: charming, selfish, quick on his feet, but he had one fatal flaw. He loved to brag when he thought he was in control. When he thought he'd won, he couldn't help himself. Even as a boy, he'd gloat when he beat me at cards or snuck cookies past my back. It was his tell. So, I decided to set a trap. A dinner. A let's talk this out meal, hosted by me, at my home, under the illusion of reconciliation. I'd invite Adam, Jenna, and Eric. I'd cook their favorite dishes, make everything look soft and safe, and wait for the moment he let his guard down. Because when liars feel safe, they talk. And when liars talk, the truth finds its way out. I spent the next few days playing dumb. I responded to Adam's texts with warmth. I told him I'd love to have him over. I even mentioned the Bronco, saying it was the best gift I'd ever given. He replied with emojis, hearts and thumbs up. I smiled as I read them, not because they meant anything, but because I knew the noose was tightening and he was walking right into it. Robin helped me build a second folder, this one marked final. It had duplicates of every email, every property lookup, every business registration tied to Omnicore Investments. We even tracked down the Arizona online legal service where Jenna had filed the LLC. Robin called the registration agent and pretended to be a confused investor. The woman on the other end confirmed Jenna's identity without hesitation. "This isn't even subtle," Robin muttered as she hung up. "They barely tried to cover their tracks, because they didn't think they had to," I said. I wrote a timeline meticulously reconstructed. April 4, surgery. April 5, Adam brings coffee and paperwork. April 7, transfer notarized by Eric. April 12, filing submitted to county records. April 13, Jenna registers Omnicore Investments. May 2, Bronco gifted. May 2, later, vent conversation. She didn't even ask. Every dot connected like a constellation of greed. Then, just as we were organizing everything, Robin's phone buzzed. She was on break at work when it happened. An old voicemail she almost deleted, thinking it was spam. She pressed play without thinking, and froze. "Claire," she said, running back into my kitchen. "You need to hear this." She handed me her phone. It was Adam's voice, muffled slightly, but clear, and once she signs the rest, it's done. I don't care if she figures it out later. Jenna said she'll spin it like a tax move or something. Then Jenna's voice followed, in the background. "Just keep smiling. She's still soft from the car." I closed my eyes as the words wrapped around me like ice. Soft from the car. That car, my sacrifice, my 5 years of saving, my symbol of love, was a tool, a calculated distraction, a muzzle. They didn't care about the Bronco. They didn't care about me. It was all a performance. And I had it now, on tape. I saved the voicemail in 3 places: my phone, a USB stick, and a password-protected folder in the cloud. I labeled the file Confession Audio. Then I transcribed it word for word, highlighting each voice, each line, each pause. Now it wasn't just emotional. It was legal. Fraud, manipulation, abuse of power. And I wasn't going to beg for justice. I was going to deliver it. That voicemail changed everything. It wasn't just the smoking gun. It was a funeral bell, a death knell, for whatever illusion I still clung to that maybe, just maybe, Adam didn't mean to hurt me. That he'd been pressured, misguided, caught in something he didn't fully understand. But no, that wasn't the voice of a confused son. That was the voice of a man who'd already made peace with betraying his mother, who thought she was too soft, too distracted, too blinded by love to notice. I wasn't just dealing with selfishness, I was dealing with intent. And once I accepted that, something inside me snapped into place. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I got up, went to my printer, and started printing. I printed the transcript of the voicemail. I printed Jenna's LLC registration with the filing date circled in red. I printed the notarized deed transfer with Eric's signature beside mine. I printed the timeline I drafted, highlighting every move they made. Each page a brick in the wall I was building between us. Brick by brick, betrayal by betrayal. Robin called it war. I called it a reckoning. "I'm going to invite them to dinner," I told her as we sat in the kitchen, wine untouched, papers spread across the table like a crime board. Robin raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" I nodded. "Adam, Jenna, and Eric. I'm going to feed them like family and then bury them like enemies." She let out a low whistle and said, "Then let's make sure the main course is scorched earth." We stayed up until 2 in the morning. I printed duplicates, organized every tab with color-coded labels: evidence, legal, voicemails, audio, transcript, timeline, events, LLC, ownership and intent. I tucked them into thick manila envelopes, one for each of them. I even used gold foil seals, because if I was going to burn a bridge, I might as well do it with elegance. Then, I drafted the message. Family dinner, just us. Like old times. I want a chance to reconnect. I'll cook your favorites. Let's talk. I sent it to Adam. I texted Jenna directly too. Just to be sure. She responded with a simple, "Can't wait." That emoji nearly made me laugh. Eric took longer. He finally replied the next morning with, "I'll come. We should talk." Talk. That's what they all thought this would be. An apology dinner, a chance to smooth things over. They still didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't soft anymore. While Robin handled the tech, I handled the house. We installed 3 hidden cameras. Discreet, silent, motion activated. One behind a faux vent grate in the dining room. Another nestled inside a decorative plant. The third tucked into the base of the hanging light fixture above the table. All angles covered. All microphones tested. I bought 2 extra chairs for the dining room, so there'd be nowhere to shift, nowhere to hide. I set a seating chart. Adam across from me, Jenna to his left, Eric beside her, Robin at the far end as my anchor, one empty chair beside me for the weight of everything they took. I pulled out my mother's linen tablecloth, the one with the embroidered blue trim, used only for holidays. I polished the silverware until it shined. I cleaned the windows, vacuumed the rugs, scrubbed every corner of that house like I was preparing it for a guest I actually loved. Because the truth is, this wasn't about them, it was about me, taking back my name, taking back the space they tried to steal, reclaiming the version of myself I had slowly buried over decades of silence. I chose the menu carefully. Adam's favorite roast chicken with rosemary and garlic, scalloped potatoes, green beans with bacon, fresh rolls. Jenna liked Pinot Noir, so I bought a bottle even though I knew she wouldn't finish it. Eric had a sweet tooth, so I made chocolate pie from scratch. I cooked it all myself. Every bite, every smell. I wanted that house to smell like memory, like comfort, like the life I gave them that they threw away. Then I prepped the final detail. I hollowed out a cookbook, the old one I used to keep in the kitchen drawer, with grease stains on the corners and notes in the margins. I tucked the evidence envelopes inside. The flash drive went in the spine slot, carefully one small, clear case with every audio clip, every scan, every screenshot, and a video intro I recorded just in case they tried to flip the narrative. I stood in the dining room late that night, everything set, everything silent, and said aloud, "Let them come." The day of the dinner arrived like any other. Sunlight, birds, the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. But in my chest, it felt like a courtroom door opening. Like I was walking into the last scene of a very long play I didn't audition for, but had been forced to star in anyway. Robin showed up early with her laptop and a Bluetooth speaker. We did one last check on the camera angles, all green. We tested the sound. Crisp, clear, no interference. I handed her the backup flash drive. "If anything goes wrong," I said, "you post it." She nodded, eyes steely. Then we set the table, plates aligned, glasses poured, envelopes stacked neatly under the hollowed cookbook. The air smelled like sage and butter and secrets. At 6:12 p.m., Adam arrived. He wore a button-down shirt and cologne that didn't belong to him. He smiled like a politician. Jenna followed behind, wine bottle in hand, dressed too tight for comfort, eyes scanning the room like she expected hidden cameras and didn't find them. Eric came last, shifty, sweaty, blinking too fast. I welcomed them like nothing was wrong. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. "Come in, sit down, let's catch up." I watched their bodies ease. I watched their eyes soften. I watched their masks slip back into place. And I waited. Because the truth wasn't going to shout. It was going to sit down at my table. We sat down at the table like it was any other family dinner. Except it wasn't. It was a funeral in disguise. The dining room glowed with soft golden light from the setting sun and the chandelier above. Every fork was in place. Every napkin was folded with precision, and every person seated had no idea they were about to be gutted with the truth. Adam sat across from me, his smile too wide, his shirt too crisp as if he'd dressed in someone else's skin. Jenna was poised beside him, one leg crossed over the other, her polished nails tapping lightly on the rim of her wine glass. Eric slouched to her left, eyes darting from plate to plate like he expected a trap and still didn't know where it was. Robin sat at the far end, silent, calm, observing like a quiet jury. I raised my glass and smiled. To family. The toast echoed hollowly. We clinked glasses, and the meal began. For the first 10 minutes, I let them settle into their performances. Adam complimented the chicken, just like you used to make, Mom. Jenna made polite remarks about the wine and asked how long I'd been back in the house. Eric kept his eyes down and drank faster than he ate. I nodded. I smiled. I passed the dishes. I let them believe I was there for peace. Jenna leaned in at one point and asked, "So, have you decided what you want to do with the place long term?" There it was. I took a sip of water and said, "Still thinking." She nodded too quickly, like someone ticking a box. I asked her how real estate had been. She launched into a monologue about the market, the inventory shortage, buyer psychology, classic deflection. Adam chimed in with vague business buzzwords, talking about investment opportunities and liquid assets, like he had a portfolio instead of a shell company. Eric, to his credit, stayed quiet. Guilty silence wrapped around him like a scarf. We finished the meal slowly. I didn't rush it. I let the wine do its work. I let the warmth of the room lull them into that sweet, vulnerable space where masks loosen and lips spill. Then I stood. "I have something for us to do before dessert," I said, smiling. Adam raised an eyebrow. "A game?" "Of sorts," I replied. I walked over to the shelf and pulled the hollowed-out cookbook. The weight in my hands felt heavier than paper. It felt like the last stone of the foundation I'd rebuilt for myself. I turned back to them and placed a sealed envelope in front of each plate. They looked at the envelopes, then at me. "What is this?" Jenna asked, her voice suddenly sharper. "A thank you," I said. "From me to you. Go ahead. Open them." They did. One by one, I watched their expressions shift. Adam blinked like he was trying to erase the words in front of him. Jenna's jaw twitched. Eric went pale, then red, then pale again. The room went silent, except for the sound of unfolding pages and growing dread. Inside each envelope was a full record. A copy of the notarized deed transfer, the LLC registration, the transcript of the voicemail, the timeline, my signature beside Eric's, Jenna's name filed under Omnicore Investments. Every dot connected in unforgiving ink. I sat back down, folded my hands and said, "I know what you did." Jenna was the first to react. "This doesn't prove anything," she said, voice brittle. "It's all circumstantial." I didn't even look at her. I looked at Adam. "You used my trust," I said quietly. "You waited until I was recovering from surgery. You slipped that deed into a stack of insurance papers and watched me sign it. Then you filed it, with the help of your uncle, and used your girlfriend's name to register a business to cover the theft." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "You used that car, my 5 years of saving scraping to buy my silence. You handed me a drink tray at your party and called me the help, hoping I'd be too humiliated to notice what you stole. Still nothing. No denial. No rage. Just silence. You played me like a mark," I said, voice steady. "But here's the thing. You recorded every move. You left a trail." I reached into the hollow of the book and pulled out a small clear flash drive. I set it in the center of the table. "This has the footage from tonight. 3 cameras, clear audio. You didn't just lie, you did it on camera. And if you try to come near me again, if you even think about denying it, I'll make sure every person who ever shook your hand sees who you really are." Eric swallowed hard, Jenna's hands clenched in her lap. Adam looked at me like I had become someone else. And maybe I had. But I was done waiting to be understood. I stood again, walked to the sideboard, and retrieved one last folder. I returned to the table and placed it in front of Adam. "This is from my lawyer," I said. "It revokes every inheritance right you thought you had. It includes a cease and desist notice regarding any use of my name or property, and it states, clearly, that if you attempt to make any future claim, I will pursue felony fraud charges." No one touched their glasses. No one finished their food. I stepped back and left them sitting there, staring at the ashes of the story they tried to write for me. Then I paused at the doorway, turned back, and said the final words that sealed it all. As of tonight, I don't consider you my son. You are not my family. You are not my legacy. You are a man who stole from a woman who would have died for him. And I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't sob or throw plates or demand answers that wouldn't change anything. I just walked out of the dining room, my feet moving quietly over the hardwood floors I'd scrubbed that morning, past the living room where I used to read bedtime stories, past the hall that had once echoed with my son's laughter, and stepped onto the front porch like I was stepping into new air. And it was new. It smelled like pine and dust and a storm that hadn't yet arrived. I stood there, just breathing, letting the silence inside my house settle like dust over everything I used to believe. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was happening behind me. Stunned silence, darting eyes, maybe even whispered panic. Good. Let them sit in the discomfort of what they'd done. Let them feel what betrayal tastes like when it's served with proof instead of pity. I could have ended it. Right there. I could have let them slink away with their envelopes and their shame, but something inside me refused to leave that final chord. Unresolved. I waited. 1 minute. 2. Just long enough for the weight of the silence to press into their spines. Then I stepped back inside. They were exactly where I left them. Adam still clutching the envelope, Jenna's hand frozen on her wine glass, Eric looking at the flash drive like it might explode. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, hands at my sides, my voice low but clear. I thought a lot about what to say to you tonight, about how to explain what you really took from me. But then I realized, you didn't just take a house. You didn't just forge a deed or file a company under false pretenses. I looked directly at Adam. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't regret, it was fear. You took me. You hollowed out the last real thing I had, the last piece of my father, of my name, of everything I built from nothing. I paused. And you did it while calling me mom, while hugging me with one arm and stealing with the other. He blinked. Just once. I turned to Jenna. I hope you got everything you wanted out of this. Because what you've taken can't be returned, and what you've ruined can't be patched up with wine and tight dresses. Then, I turned to Eric. You were dead to me. A long time ago. This just makes it official. No one spoke. Not a word. The air in the room felt like it could crack if someone exhaled too hard. I reached under the table and pulled out one last manila folder. This one bore an official seal. My lawyer's office. This letter formally revokes any and all inheritance rights. It includes a clause that prevents you, Adam, from speaking for me, about me, or claiming association with me in any legal or public capacity. You are not permitted at my funeral. You are not entitled to anything that bears my name. You are a stranger now. Adam's mouth opened slightly like he wanted to argue, but then he closed it. He knew. There was nothing left to say. His poker hand had been flipped, and all his cards were blank. I turned and walked away again, this time slower, letting the weight of it all settle around me. The room behind me stayed silent. No begging, no chasing, no apologies, just the sound of their own shame echoing against the silverware. When I reached the porch again, the cool air hit me like relief. It was done. That was the night I buried my son. Not with a coffin or a eulogy, but with the truth and a stack of receipts. Robin came out a few minutes later. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes told me everything. Respect, sorrow, and something like awe. You okay? She asked. I will be. That night, we stayed up drinking tea and watching the footage again, making sure every angle, every word, was captured. It was all there, clear as day. From Adam's silence, to Jenna's deflection, to Eric's guilt. A perfect timeline of betrayal, exposed like a raw nerve. Robin helped me create the upload account. We masked my identity, trimmed the footage, added captions, no fluff, no commentary, just the truth. The video started with Adam's birthday party, his tip the help moment. Then it cut to Jenna's voicemail, then the dinner conversation, then my final words. You are not my son anymore. We uploaded it overnight. By morning, it had 3,000 shares. By lunch, 20,000. By dinner, it was on the local news. Headline: Mother disowns son after he steals her house. I watched it unfold in real time. Comments poured in, some crying, some angry, some tagging their own children. Some simply said, "This woman deserves peace." For the first time in months, I felt seen. Adam's HVAC business got flooded with one-star reviews. Jenna's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Someone had sent the clip to the state board along with public records showing the fraudulent transfer. Eric disappeared entirely. No social media, no texts, no word. And me? I was still here, still standing. A few days later, Adam sent a message. "Please call me." I didn't know it would get this far. I read it. Then I deleted it. Because it wasn't about how far it went, it was about how far he was willing to take me before I finally saw him for what he was. Not a son. Not a victim. A stranger. The strange thing about finality is how quiet it feels. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, like I'd won something. But instead, I sat on my porch, that evening, with a lukewarm mug of tea, and the kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles inside your bones and makes a home there. Robin had gone home. The house was clean again. Dishes washed, cameras disarmed, evidence files stacked neatly in my bedroom closet beside a fireproof lockbox. The linen tablecloth was back in its drawer, still creased from the night it bore the weight of 3 people's guilt. And I was just sitting with myself, breathing. No music, no distractions, just me, the wind, and the sound of crickets picking up their evening song. The porch light buzzed overhead. I hadn't changed the bulb in months, and it flickered every few seconds, like even it wasn't sure whether to stay or go. I rocked in my chair, slow, steady, my hands curled around the mug, not because I needed warmth, but because I needed something to hold, something that wouldn't lie to me. The view from my porch hadn't changed in years. Same oak tree, same cracked sidewalk, same little mailbox with its dented corner from the time Adam hit it with his skateboard. Back then, he'd cried and tried to fix it himself, wrapping duct tape around it like a bandage. He was 7, still full of apology, still full of I missed that boy so much, it made my teeth ache. But that boy was gone, and I was done grieving him. 3 days passed before I heard from him again. No knock, no voicemail, just a package on my doorstep. One morning, a small box wrapped in brown paper with no return label. Robin was the one who spotted it. She was dropping off cinnamon rolls and a replacement bulb. "There's something outside," she said, peeking through the blinds. I opened the door. There it was, neat, clean, too careful. Inside was a single item, the key to the Bronco, on a thin chain. No note, no apology, just the key, resting on a bed of black felt like it was a peace offering. Robin looked over my shoulder. "Want me to toss it?" I shook my head. "No, I know what to do with it." That afternoon, I took out the small wood plaque I'd been working on. I'd been burning letters into it for days, unsure if I'd ever finish, but now I knew. I mounted the key onto the board and added the final line below it. She wasn't just the help. I hung it in the entryway. The key was never about the car. It was about every time I'd been minimized, every joke at my expense, every moment I'd been made to feel small so someone else could feel bigger. And now, it was nailed to my wall, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but as a warning to myself. Never again. A week later, I filed the final affidavit to officially transfer the property title back into my name. My lawyer handled the paperwork with mechanical efficiency, but even she looked up at me once and said, "You know, most people wouldn't have caught this in time." I nodded. I wasn't most people anymore. By the end of that week, the house was mine again. Clean, unencumbered, legally sealed, my name printed across the top of the title in bold font. I held that document in my lap on the living room floor and stared at it for a long time, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. I thought about my father, the way he stood in the driveway of that house the day he signed it over to me, grease on his hands, a can of beer in his left, and pride in his right. "You hold on to this," he'd said. "It's not just wood and pipes, it's me." He was right. That house was more than shelter, it was memory, it was sacrifice, it was dignity. And they almost took it, but they didn't. I moved in the following month, no announcement, no photos, no ribbon cutting, just me, a rented U-Haul, and Robin blasting old Dolly Parton songs through a Bluetooth speaker while she unpacked boxes. The house smelled like dust and old wood and something I hadn't felt in a long time, belonging. I painted the kitchen walls a soft yellow, replaced the broken blinds in the front room, and spent 2 days on my knees pulling weeds from the garden bed beside the porch. My hands ached, my back screamed, but I felt more alive than I had in years. One morning, while sweeping the back porch, I paused and looked at the extra bedroom, and an idea struck. It started small, just a thought, really, a whisper. But by that evening, I was clearing out the old furniture, dragging in a twin bed frame from the garage, and labeling drawers. I called it the nest, a safe room, a place for women like me, older, overlooked, forgotten by their own children, or pushed out by manipulation and guilt. Not a shelter, not a charity, just a place to land, a place to start over. Robin helped me spread the word quietly. Within 3 months, I had 2 women sleeping under my roof, helping with meals, tending the yard, sitting on the porch in the evening light. I didn't charge them. I didn't ask questions. I just gave them a room and dignity. Because I knew what it felt like to be erased. And I would not let that happen to someone else. Not on my watch. Not in my house. Every Sunday, I walked the hallways with my hand touching the walls, like I was telling the house, "You're safe now. No one will use you against love again." 2 months passed. The house found its rhythm. Morning sun through the kitchen window. Coffee mugs clinking softly. Quiet footsteps from the spare bedroom. First Marie, then Judith. 2 women who had been left behind by their own families in different ways, both now rebuilding piece by piece. We cooked together, we shared stories, and every so often, we just sat on the porch in silence. Sometimes silence says more than survival ever could. I didn't talk about Adam. Not to them, not to Robin, not even to myself. The key on the wall said enough. But grief doesn't obey logic. It doesn't always follow the path you lay out for it. It waits until you've built something steady, then slips in through a crack you didn't notice. It was a Tuesday. Late afternoon, warm light spilled through the living room like honey. I had just finished scrubbing the baseboards when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Robin was at work, Judith was in the garden. I dried my hands, walked to the door, and peeked through the peephole. It was Adam. My breath caught. He looked small. Not physically, he still had the same height, the same shoulders, but there was something missing. The confidence, the posture, the performance. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, his hair hung limp, like he'd forgotten what a comb was. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, not moving, not knocking again. I didn't open the door, not right away. I stood there, frozen, one hand on the knob, the other bracing the frame, breathing shallow. My first instinct was to turn away. Let him stand there, let him feel what silence sounds like when it isn't merciful. But something in me needed to see him. Not to forgive, not to reconcile, but to witness who he had become. I opened the door slowly. He looked up, startled. His mouth opened like he had rehearsed a line and forgot it the second he saw me. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He entered cautiously, his eyes sweeping the living room like he was entering a museum he hadn't earned a ticket for. He noticed the key on the wall, his gaze paused there, then dropped to the floor. I walked into the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. He sat at the kitchen table, his old seat, the one he used to do math homework at, back when he still asked me for help spelling words like embarrassed. I placed his cup down in front of him and sat across from him, arms folded. He didn't speak for a while. Then, finally, his voice broke the air. "I don't even know who I am anymore." I watched him. Every flicker of expression, every twitch of his jaw. I keep thinking, if I could just explain what I was thinking, maybe. I held up a hand. "You're not here to explain," I said. "You're here because you don't like the way silence feels." He looked away, then back. His eyes were glassy. "I didn't mean to hurt you like that," he said. "Jenna had all these plans," she said. "If we flipped the house, we could—" I cut him off. "Get ahead. Be free. Solve everything with a lie and a signature." "I know. I thought if we did it fast enough, we could fix it later." I tilted my head. "You didn't want to fix it. You wanted me to not notice." He didn't deny it. "I was scared," he said. "Everything was falling apart. I thought, I don't know what I thought. That maybe if we pulled it off, we'd finally be okay. I leaned forward, voice low. You weren't scared, Adam. You were selfish. You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan, and you executed it while calling me mom and serving cocktails in a mansion I paid for. His lip quivered. He nodded slowly. I don't expect you to forgive me, he whispered. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said, there is nothing else to do. You already did it. His eyes filled, not the dramatic kind of crying. The slow, heavy tears that come from somewhere deeper than guilt, closer to grief. He cried with his shoulders, his ribs, his breath. I didn't comfort him, because I realized he wasn't mourning me. He was mourning the version of himself that I had let him believe still existed. The one I used to look up to. The one he tried to pretend was still real when he rang my doorbell. I don't hate you, I said. But I don't know you, and you don't know me. He looked up, searching my face for something: mercy, memory, hope. I didn't give it. I stood and walked to the front door. He followed. No more words. When we reached the threshold, I opened it and stepped aside. As he passed, I placed my hand lightly on his shoulder. Not with love, not with anger, just with finality. He turned like he might say something else, but I shut the door before he could. Then I leaned against it and listened. There were no footsteps, just silence. Not the kind that asks for forgiveness, the kind that accepts defeat. It took 3 more weeks to finish the legal cleanup. And even then, I moved like someone haunted, not by ghosts, but by the paperwork of betrayal. The fine print, the forged signature, the notarized lie dressed in legal clothes. Every day, I woke up early, made strong black coffee, sat at the kitchen table with highlighters, document folders, sticky notes, and my reading glasses. My lawyer and I exchanged emails almost daily. She was sharp, calm, efficient, the kind of woman who didn't blink twice when I said, I want everything tied up airtight. No loopholes, no claws left in the drywall. Together, we compiled everything. We submitted sworn statements, revocation notices, fraud declarations, a detailed affidavit outlining the circumstances of the forged deed. Robin helped me scan documents late into the night. I kept triple backups of everything, one in the cloud, one on a USB stick, one in a shoebox under the guest room bed. We filed the final ownership correction with the county. My lawyer said it might take a couple of weeks for the title deed to be reissued in my name. I could wait. I'd already waited long enough. In the meantime, I threw myself into the nest, painting trim, repairing cabinet hinges, rewiring a hallway light that buzzed when it got cold. Judith helped me build a raised garden bed out back, and we planted tomatoes and basil and lavender. The air began to smell like healing. And yet, every now and then, I still caught myself flinching when the doorbell rang. It was instinct. Old wiring. The body remembering what the heart had tried to forget. But then, on a quiet Thursday morning, it came. An envelope in the mailbox. Thin, but heavy. I knew what it was before I opened it. The title deed. My name, Claire Morgan, printed clean and bold across the top. No LLC, no transfer records, no falsified clauses, just me. The rightful owner. The daughter of the man who built that house. The woman who fought tooth and nail to keep it from becoming another casualty of silence. I didn't frame it. I didn't post a photo. I just sat with it in my lap on the living room floor and stared at it for a long time, like you would with a newborn baby, or a flag draped over a coffin. Not out of celebration, but because it had weight. This house wasn't about money. It never was. It was my father's sweat in the foundation, my mother's laughter in the hallway, my own breath against the window the first night I moved in, unsure if I'd made the right decision after the divorce. It had seen every version of me, and now I had reclaimed it. That night, Robin brought over lemon bars and cheap wine. We sat on the back porch watching the solar lights flicker on one by one. You did it, she said. I nodded. Yeah, I did. You feel better? I feel clean, not fixed, not whole, but like I finally took off a jacket I didn't know I was wearing. She smiled and leaned back in her chair. I glanced toward the side yard where the weeds used to choke the chain-link fence. Now it was lined with mulch and lavender, and the scent carried on the breeze like a quiet hymn. I wasn't rebuilding a life. I was restoring it. One afternoon, the following week, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was familiar, slanted left, sharp on the Adam. I didn't open it immediately. I set it on the counter, made tea, walked the house, dusted the bookshelves, and let the envelope sit there like a test I didn't ask to take. But eventually, I opened it. I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say it anyway. I didn't realize how far I had fallen until you looked at me like you didn't recognize me. I don't have excuses. I only have regret. I don't expect a second chance, but I want you to know every day I think about what I lost. And I know now that I didn't just lose a house, I lost a mother I never deserved. I hope you're okay, Adam. I reread it once. Then I folded it, tucked it into a drawer labeled closed, and never opened it again. That was the difference now. I could hear from him, and it wouldn't knock me off my feet. I could see his handwriting and not forget who I was. I was Claire Morgan, 62, survivor of 1,000 cuts, some shallow, some bone deep, not anyone's waitress, not anyone's scapegoat, not anyone's fallback plan, just me. And I was enough. Every Sunday, I kept the tradition. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls with my palm, like I was telling them, "You're safe now. I see you. I won't let them break you again." Marie eventually moved out, reunited with a daughter who had finally reached out after years of estrangement. Judith stayed, helped me expand the garden, and took over the guest cooking duties. Sometimes we hosted small dinners for other women. Nothing formal, just people who needed a place to feel human again. We never talked about our pasts, unless someone wanted to. Mostly, we talked about herbs, about peach cobbler recipes, about how the paint in the hallway never seemed to dry evenly, no matter how many coats we applied. It was a new kind of peace, the quiet kind. The kind you earn. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still days when my knees ached, when the roof leaked after a hard rain, when I sat in the pantry longer than I needed to, just to breathe without explaining myself. Peace isn't a switch, it's a rhythm. And I was still learning the tempo. But what changed, what stayed, was that I had changed. I stopped flinching at kindness. I stopped apologizing for the space I took up. And I stopped shrinking in conversations where I once would have smiled and let someone else talk over me. Because now, I knew, my silence had been a gift too many people mistook for weakness. I had strength now. A strength built not on revenge, but on remembering. One day, about a month after I'd received the corrected deed, I was sorting through the hall closet when I found an old photo album wedged behind a stack of holiday lights. I hadn't touched it in years. My fingers traced the worn leather cover. I sat down cross-legged in the hallway, album in my lap like a prayer book, and opened it. There we were. Me and Adam. Baby teeth, missing socks, skinned knees, birthday cakes, Halloween costumes. Him asleep on my chest with a bottle falling from his tiny hand. His first APOS paper, his first black eye. Me holding his hand at the hospital when he broke his wrist falling off the jungle gym. Page after page of a boy who had once looked at me like I hung the stars. I touched one photo, us on the front steps of this very house. He was 10. I was 39. We were holding matching ice cream cones and laughing at something the camera didn't catch. That laugh. I could still hear it. I closed the album gently and whispered, "You were worth it. Even if I lost you in the end." It didn't hurt to say that anymore. That was the difference. Later that week, Judith brought in the mail and handed me a small stack of letters. Bills, a gardening magazine, and one heavy cream envelope with no return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but careful. Inside was a card. No signature, just a printed quote. "What you do matters, more than you know." And a note in careful cursive. "Because of you, I found the courage to say goodbye to my own son. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for giving us a voice." There was no name, but I knew what it meant. And I started getting more. Little by little, word had spread. Not from the video I'd taken that down months ago, once the dust had settled. But the ripple didn't stop just because the water calmed. Women wrote to me, sometimes from other states, sometimes just a few blocks away. Their words were different, but the pain was the same. My daughter stole everything in my account. My husband made me sign the papers after my surgery. I didn't know I could say no. I didn't know I could say enough. I kept every letter, taped them inside a large sketchbook, and labeled it the Ledger of Survival. Robin called it a war journal. Judith called it a hymn book. I just called it proof that I wasn't alone. One morning, I was sitting on the porch, sipping tea, when Judith stepped outside with her gardening gloves still on and said, "You should tell your story. The whole thing, start to finish." I looked at her, skeptical. What for? Because there are women out there who haven't walked through the fire yet, and maybe your words will help them find the first match. I let the thought sit with me. It felt terrifying, vulnerable, but also true. That night, I opened my laptop and began to write. Not for Adam, not for Jenna, not for Eric or anyone else who had tried to turn me into a side note in my own story. I wrote for women with shaking hands and steady hearts, for women who had been betrayed by blood and expected to pretend it didn't stain, for women who knew what it meant to smile through the sting. I didn't write like I was trying to be brave. I wrote because I already was. It took weeks, maybe months. I didn't count. I just kept going. Every morning, I'd sit by the kitchen window with a cup of tea and add another chapter. Robin proofread. Judith offered memory prompts. Marie, who came back for a visit one weekend, brought her publisher friend, who read the first 3 pages and said, This isn't just a story, this is a mirror." By fall, we had a manuscript. Raw, real, mine. I titled it, She Wasn't Just the Help. We self-published. Quietly. No tour, no big announcement. Just a few copies printed, a few libraries contacted, a few quiet ripples let loose into the world. And that was enough. I didn't want fame. I wanted impact. And slowly, it found its way. A podcast reached out, then a local women's shelter, then a newsletter for senior living communities. And every time someone said, "Thank you," I said the same thing back. "You're not alone anymore." Because I wasn't either. Fall settled over the house, like a long exhale. The porch plants began to crisp. The lavender faded into a muted silver. Even the birdsong changed, softer, more thoughtful, like nature itself had entered a period of reflection. So had I. I found myself taking longer walks, not for exercise, but for listening, to the trees creaking, to the shuffle of leaves underfoot, to the way the wind carried stories, if you were still long enough to hear them. It wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about grounding, rooting myself not in the past, but in what came after. People still sent letters. Some sent bookmarks or pressed flowers. One woman mailed me a pair of knitting needles and a note that simply read, "You reminded me who I used to be." I kept everything. The book didn't go viral, and I was glad. It stayed quiet, personal, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, like truth should be, like healing has to be. One morning, I was sitting in the reading chair by the front window when Judith came in, holding the cordless phone. "It's a local reporter," she said. "Wants to talk about the book. Says a few women have quoted it at a city council meeting." I blinked. "A city council meeting?" She nodded. "Apparently one of them used your story to argue for housing protections for elderly women. They called it the Morgan Clause." I laughed. A short, stunned sound. "What did you tell them?" "That you'd call them back after your tea," Judith said with a wink. I never did return that call, not out of fear, just knowing. I didn't need to sit under fluorescent lights and talk into a microphone. I didn't need to defend what was already printed in black and white. The truth didn't need defending. It just needed preserving. Still, the world changed around me, in little ways I never could have predicted. Robin started hosting women's circles, once a month. Not therapy. Just space. Safe, round, no chairs facing corners. Sometimes, 5 women showed up. Sometimes, 20. They came with stories like mine, or nothing but silence. We made tea, lit candles, passed around a bowl of questions no one was forced to answer. And in that quiet, something sacred grew. We weren't fixing each other. We were witnessing each other. That was enough. I found peace in routine. Morning coffee, afternoon watering of the rosemary bush, Sunday walks through each room of the house, hand brushing the walls. The Ledger of Survival was now 2 books thick. Judith joked we needed a bookshelf just for it. I told her, "No, it stays near the door." People who came into our home, friends, guests, neighbors who'd heard whispers of the house that grew back, often paused in front of the framed key and plaque by the door. Their eyes lingered on the words, "She wasn't just the help." Some asked what it meant. Most didn't. I never explained. That wasn't their burden to carry. One afternoon in late October, I was in the backyard, cutting dead growth from the basil, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I turned, clippers in hand. It was Adam. My first thought wasn't fear, it wasn't even anger. It was stillness. He looked thinner, older, more human. He didn't try to come closer, just stood at the edge of the yard, hands in his coat pockets. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quietly. I drive past sometimes. I don't know why." I nodded once. "You don't have to know." He swallowed, looking down at his shoes. "I heard about the book." I raised an eyebrow. "You read it?" He shook his head. "Didn't think I deserved to." "You don't," I said. Not unkind, just true. "But I'm glad it exists." The wind shifted. I went back to snipping basil. He didn't move. After a moment, he said, "She left. Jenna." I kept working. "She took everything, even the dog." "I'm sorry for the dog," I said. He let out a huff that was almost a laugh. "I'm not here to make things right," he said. "I know I can't. I just wanted to say, I don't walk through this world the same way anymore." I nodded, still not looking at him. "That's something, at least." Silence settled again, not heavy, just he finally said, "Goodbye, Mom." I didn't respond, not because I was cruel, but because I'd already said goodbye once, and it had cost me everything. He walked away without waiting for forgiveness. That was the first gift he ever gave me that I didn't have to return. That night, I wrote one last page in the ledger. He came back, not with hands out, not with promises, just with the weather in his voice and the dog gone, and for once, I didn't owe him anything. That's what healing looks like. Being able to see the storm without needing to run into it. Winter arrived like a whisper that lingered. The mornings were quieter. Frost crept onto the window edges in delicate lace patterns. The porch plants finally gave in to the season and turned brown at the stems. Judith crocheted thick blankets in the living room while I lit candles that smelled like cinnamon and pine. Everything softened. Everything, except the part of me that had once bent to accommodate the needs of others at the expense of my own peace. That part no longer existed. It had been pruned like overgrown branches, cleared to make room for something new. One night, I sat by the fireplace, staring at the slow flicker of the flames, and realized something I hadn't dared name before. I was whole, not perfect, not untouched, but whole. There was no longer a part of me that belonged to someone else's expectations. No pieces left in the pockets of people who had emptied me. I had stitched myself back together, not by pretending the wounds hadn't happened, but by making them part of the pattern. Scars are just healed stories. That same night, I received a letter. It was from a woman named Teresa, 58, from Idaho. The envelope was thick, filled with 8 handwritten pages. Her story unfolded slowly, shakily. An abusive husband who had tricked her into signing over her retirement fund while she was sedated after surgery. A son who sided with the father. A sister who told her to just move on. And then, I read your book. I wept until the sun came up. Then I got a lawyer. That line stopped me. Then I smiled. I added her letter to the ledger of survival, now on its 3rd binder, and wrote her back. A short note. 1 sentence. "Keep going. You're not done yet." That was the truth, wasn't it? None of us were done yet. The nest had grown. Judith suggested we convert the detached garage into another room, and we did. A contractor from the women's circle donated labor. Someone's cousin sent paint. Robin ordered fairy lights and strung them herself, muttering about ladder rungs the whole time. We called the new space the hearth. It housed women who needed shorter stays, women passing through, women who didn't want to be seen until they decided who they were again. We gave them the option of anonymity. No questions asked. No one had to prove their pain to be allowed in. I made sure of that. Every Friday, we held what we called porch hour. No agenda, no speeches, just tea, wool socks, rocking chairs, and the kind of silence that lets the soul breathe. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes someone cried. Sometimes we just watched the sun fall over the yard in thick orange lines. I had never felt more useful in my life. One afternoon, I was walking through the hallway, my usual Sunday ritual, touching each wall, whispering little prayers of ownership and peace, when I noticed something different. The house no longer felt like it had to prove itself. It wasn't defending its right to be mine anymore. It simply was, and so was I. My name was Claire Morgan. I was 62 years old. I was a woman who had been laughed at, used, underestimated, and nearly erased, but not forgotten. Not by herself. Not anymore. The keys still hung on the entryway wall. The plaque still read, "She wasn't just the help," but sometimes, when visitors walked by it and paused, I smiled and thought to myself, she was also the storm, the seed, the start, because what they'd tried to bury had taken root. One late winter morning, Judith and I sat by the kitchen window watching snow fall in slow flakes, and she asked me, "If you could go back to the day you gave him the car, would you still do it?" I didn't answer right away. I poured another cup of tea, stirred in honey, took a long sip. Then I said, "Yes." Judith blinked. "Even knowing what he did?" "Especially knowing what he did," I said, "because that gift, that red-bowed Bronco, was the beginning of the end." "Yes, but it was also the beginning of me. It showed me who he was, and who I wasn't willing to be anymore. That car cost me 5 years of savings, but it gave me the rest of my life back. It gave me truth, it gave me clarity, and most importantly, it gave me the push I needed to finally stop waiting to be loved right and start loving myself enough to walk away when I wasn't. Not every ending needs to be clean, but mine, finally. Spring came early that year. Birdsong returned to the hedges. The lavender sprouted new green shoots. The rosemary bloomed tiny purple flowers, and the nest was full of women planting things again. Herbs, tomatoes, stories. One of the younger women we took in, Isabel, painted a mural on the back fence. It showed a woman with silver hair standing in a field of wild sunflowers, one hand outstretched, offering a key to someone just off frame. She didn't ask me if she could paint it. She didn't need to. The day she finished, I stood in front of it, fingers tingling, heart wide open. She had painted me, but she hadn't painted my face. She'd painted my strength. That's how I want to be remembered. Not for what was taken from me, but for what I rebuilt with what remained. I woke early on my 63rd birthday. Not to balloons or a breakfast tray or a surprise knock at the door. No, I woke to the sound of birdsong, soft light on the curtains, and the quiet strength of knowing I had made it. Another year. Another page turned with intention. I brewed coffee in the kitchen, still the same chipped mug, still the same routine. The smell filled the house, like comfort. Judith had taped a small birthday card to the fridge, a silly one, with a cartoon chicken holding a cupcake. Inside, it said, "You're extraordinary." I smiled. Not the smile I used to give to cover pain. The real kind. The quiet, grateful kind that lives at the corners of your eyes and stays long after the moment is gone. I walked through the house in my slippers, hand trailing the walls. I still did that every Sunday, but on birthdays, I did it slower. I whispered thank yous. Not to anyone in particular, just to the house, the air, the me that had made it through. I paused at the entryway, in front of the plaque. The key still hung there. The words still burned into the wood. She wasn't just the help. For a while, I thought those words were about what Adam had said. But now, I knew better. They weren't a response. They were a declaration. They were who I had been all along. Helper. Yes, but also builder, guardian, anchor. A woman who had served others, not because she was lesser, but because she was strong enough to hold them, and even stronger now, for choosing herself. That day, we had a small gathering in the garden. Just a few women from the nest and the hearth, some from the women's circle, and Robin, of course, who brought a lemon lavender cake and made a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in the same breath. There were no gifts, but plenty of stories. Judith stood and told a short one about the day she moved in, broken and unsure, and how she'd never forget the first night I left the porch light on, just for her. "It's the kind of thing people do without realizing it," she said, "but I did notice, and that light. Well, it told me I still had worth." I blinked hard. Another woman, Dolores, who'd been staying with us just a few weeks, shared how the first night she slept in the hearth, she didn't dream of her ex-husband for the first time in 8 years. "I think it's the lavender," she joked, pointing to the fence. "Or maybe it's the mural." They laughed, and I let myself feel it. The belonging, the rebuilding, the unexpected legacy not built on inheritance or bloodline, but on choice. And that was when I realized the house no longer carried the weight of what had happened in it. It carried what had come after. That night, after the cake and the candles and the final wave goodbye, I sat on the porch, just me and the stars. The wind had picked up, and I pulled my shawl tight around my shoulders. The air tasted like soil and freedom, and I thought about the version of myself from a year ago. The woman who gave her son a Bronco and received a tray in return. The woman who stood in a bathroom with a casserole in her hands and betrayal in her ears. The woman who once believed that silence meant love, that forgiveness was a requirement, that dignity was optional if you called it motherhood. I wanted to go back to her. Not to warn her, but to thank her. For walking through the fire with her chin up and her fists unclenched. For staying soft enough to care, but sharp enough to fight back. For not letting the ending they gave her be the one she accepted. And when I stood to go inside, I paused at the front door. There, in place of the old brass plate with our last name that Adam had once installed, was something new. A wooden plaque, simple, carved, burned into the grain with care. Claire Morgan, caretaker, truth teller, home. It was a gift from Robin and Judith. They had hung it that morning before I woke up. I ran my fingers over the letters, over the truth of it, and I smiled. Because that was it, wasn't it? That was the story. Not about revenge.
Not about shame.
Not even about justice. But about truth. About reclaiming what was mine, not just the house, not just my name, but my narrative. They had tried to define me. But I had rewritten myself. And this time, the story would stay. So if you ever drive past a small house with a lavender garden and a porch light that never goes out, and you happen to see an older woman on a rocking chair, sipping tea from a chipped mug and humming to herself, don't feel sorry for her. Know that you're looking at someone who was broken once and built something stronger in the ruins.